It's time to be woke, take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak, and if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin, this that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, 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 yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is a fabulous Wednesday morning here in Canada. The birds are chirping, the grass is starting to grow, and people are starting to unthaw. It's kind of nice. Anyways, we have quite a large topic to talk about today, and it's going to pretty much take up our entire hour. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my fabulous co-host, Ms. Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Hey, good morning, Andy. Really appreciate that intro and everyone who would be tuning in on this fine Wednesday. So if you're just tuning in for the first time, we are live and interactive, and we definitely want you to participate in this particular conversation. We want to hear what your story is, no matter where you are in the world watching this. What are you seeing? And obviously this is all anecdotal from our personal point of view, but we want to have that conversation with you. So we are live and interactive. If you type in the chat, particularly on our Facebook page or on our Twitter, we'll see those and we'll read those on air. So for example, good morning, Mike. Mike is with us bright and early. Hopefully this is much better than your Monday last week was. We were not here on Monday because a couple things. Andy was still enjoying an Easter weekend holiday. And then I managed to score a vaccine appointment for COVID Monday, 8 a.m. So I'll admit I was very nervous about interactions because I have weird allergies, but I didn't even notice the injection. She said it's gonna hurt, and then she's like, I'm done. It's like I didn't notice anything. And then really for me personally didn't have anything other than just a little bit of tired last night, and that was it. So I can consider myself humbly lucky in managing to get at least the first course of the vaccine, and this is our subject this morning. But before we get to that,
before we say, I don't know if you said, but which vaccine did you get?
What did I get? Pfizer. So I'll need 2 courses.
Yeah, and from what I understand, I think people that are lining up for them are, for more times than not, hoping for the Pfizer one, right? I think, that it's maybe that people that are talking about it have said that there hasn't been as many side effects. I don't know.
I'm hearing that about Johnson & Johnson, though. So I was, talking to some other people and doing some reading. The Johnson & Johnson one was supposed to be, number one, it's a heavier dose, so you only need 1 injection. But I had heard fewer effects with weird allergies. So I was kind of hoping for that, but I personally didn't have any problem with the Pfizer one. So
and I think people need to stop thinking that, oh, this is what's going to happen. It's been, everyone I've talked to, it's been different. It's been different side effects, and including Deb, who got hers about a month ago because she's a healthcare professional. She got it in the arm. She didn't get the soreness. She got it Thursday afternoon. She didn't start feeling crappy until Saturday morning, and was a complete write-off for the day. Slept most of the day and was fine on Sunday. That's a day and a half later, right? I think it all depends on your immune system, maybe your age. I know that an intermuscular needle, right, always runs the risk of hitting a nerve ending. And I think that's why people can initially get the sharp acute pain. But whenever you have a solution going into a muscle, depending on where it lands, is how quickly it gets dispersed from within that muscle. And if it doesn't, and it's in a pocket where it can't leave, that's what creates the arm soreness, as far as I understand. So it's all, basically luck of the draw, for lack of a better term, and what your immune system is going to be doing, right? I think that if you get some side effects, it means that your body is perhaps attacking the virus, maybe more heartily, and you may end up with more of a defense against the virus in that case. So people that don't get any kind of side effects at all might be more susceptible to the virus, in terms of what I might think is an educated guess, or an uneducated guess, I guess you could say. But so don't expect that the people that in your family or in your household have gotten one set of side effects, that it's going to happen the exact same for you, because we've seen over and over again that that's not the case.
Oh, absolutely. And then in my case, I was nervous because I have this weird allergy to the suspension on some things, not necessarily a vaccine, but on some things. It's the fabricated suspension. It's not a liquid. I'm not sure what you call it, but there have been multiple times where I've had allergies to it. So it wasn't necessarily what was in the vaccine. It was like, what did they use to suspend it in, and will I be okay? So for my point, I just like, a little nervous. So I chose a location that was surrounded by a bunch of nurses, because when you're in trouble, what do you want more? My nurses. So
absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. I'm other than a little bit of hay fever, my only real allergy is to bullshit. So I'm hoping that there won't be any in the vaccine that I'm getting.
Right. Exactly.
So maybe not get the AstraZeneca one then.
Yeah. Okay. And Jeffrey, good morning, Jeffrey. Jeffrey's saying that I heard you really need to hydrate before and after the shot. And honestly, Jeffrey, most people are walking around chronically dehydrated. So do it. Whether it's true or not, just drink your water and do what you need to do. And then Mike says it worked out for him that we weren't on Monday because he had to watch a local township budget meeting. Well, kudos to you, Mike, for participating in your local government, because 90% of what happens at local government affects you directly. So kudos to you. And I know that you are an avid watchdog for all the stuff that's going on in your township. So thank you for that. But before we get into the big discussion on the vaccines and COVID, I have two updates that I want to share with you real quick. One is not really an update, but we talked about the union vote in Alabama with the Amazon workers. So I was expecting the public voting aspect of the process to happen on Friday. It didn't. We're still waiting for it to happen this week. And what's coming out now is a bunch of challenges, legal challenges, which we talked about, are still being formed. And all of this is over, again, with politics and ballot access. They're doing the same thing with the union vote. Who gets to vote? Who doesn't? If you just became an employee, did you get to vote? If you are a team lead, is that considered management? Management doesn't get to vote. So all of these challenges that are coming through, and I just checked the NLRB site, the National Labor Relations Board, and they're up to 113 different cases that have been filed. Not all of them pertaining to the union vote. What I'm seeing is employees in other Amazon locations around the country are filing complaints. So I think, was it New York Times or someone else that said that this is going to be a sea change for workers? And dear God, I hope so. I hope that what is happening in Alabama, regardless of how this vote comes down, has people thinking about their own rights. Just for a moment, taking a time to go, wait a second, I have rights as a worker, as an employee, all of these things that I can demand. And maybe moving forward with, getting back to 14th Amendment kind of protections that we're supposed to be guaranteed, and some corporations don't want you to know about. So
Well, and there seems right now to be a lot of real landmark cases that are happening in the courts right now. For instance, it's is it Arkansas? I believe the school districts in Arkansas have actually taken Goldman Sachs to court. They're getting their day in court because of the '08 financial crisis. All of the these subprime mortgages and these bundles that were sold as securities to some of the different pension funds
Mm.
were, of course, fraudulent, right? And of course, we saw that the Biden administration did nothing to any of the large players in that widespread corruption that happened. And we've shown that on a number of times and talked about it as well. But so they have their day in court coming up, and we're seeing a lot of these types of things where labor and unions are trying to push back on capital. But of course, the one constant in the universe is that mainstream media refuses to cover it, right?
Exactly.
Always wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Rather introduce you to China, which we're introducing as the new Russia.
Exactly. And it's, yeah, boy. And that's largely going to be part of our discussion today, where we're going to, the theme is Corona and vaccines, but you'll understand as we go through this, it's the same game as before. So, but before we get to that, happy Universal Healthcare Day. The WHO today is celebrating a push towards universal healthcare. They say access to healthcare everywhere. So, Andy, I'm pretty sure we're going to be the only network who's talking about that, particularly in the U.S., because money plays a factor in our healthcare system. So,
Yes, and it's I think it's funny that on this day of celebration, that the target I think is directly below us, right? In geographically, where myself, I mean, in the country that I live in, the target is directly below us, which means that Canada is the apple.
yes. Hopefully we get to be like Canada. But yeah, the World Health Organization has that all over their page. I included a link. So feel free to share that, particularly if you live in the United States and you have, somebody who claims to be a supporter of Medicare for all and hasn't really done anything, or somebody who's opposed to it. And yeah, I thought we'd like the World Health Organization. Here they are, doctors, nurses, scientists believe the science, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sure. Yeah, we got to make sure that we understand who it is that we're talking about, not listening to the American narrative that basically when you talk about them, they say, who?
that's exactly right. Yes. Who? WHO. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
He plays
Remember
second base for the Yankees.
first base, second base. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, remember all that outrage at leaving the WHO? Well, here you go. Here's the celebratory piece. So happy Universal Healthcare Day, everybody. So with that, Andy, let's get into it. Put up the first map, and this is from obviously Google. The numbers that you're going to see.
Okay, here comes the first map, Dora.
Thank you. Thank you. Swipe or no swiping.
It's the map. It's the map. It's the map.
Yeah, my kid's 25. I miss all of Dora. But yeah, on this map, you'll see the numbers. These are current. So 6 million total cases. This is not cumulative in any way because the US is already at 25 million cumulative. So around the world, this is what was current as of yesterday for the 14-day total. Okay, so, and by the way, yeah, my kid is tested positive now. So yeah, so he's one of those cases in the US.
Is he showing any symptoms?
Yes. Yes, he is. So yeah, idiot. Anyway, He may be at home watching. So I love you, sweetie. Drink
Yes.
lots of fluids. Yeah. So you can see the difference in the map, right? At first blush, they look the same, but they're not. So in the blue, you have the cases, the confirmed cases, and then below that, you've got the vaccinations. There's a difference here. There's a massive difference between the outbreak and the peak as opposed to the supply of vaccinations. This is really what we're going to talk about, why this is happening. Because all of the vaccinations, they have different effectivity, but they all are targeting the immune response so that if you get it, like we have Venezuelan president, I forget his name, my apologies. He had been vaccinated and he just tested positive for COVID. So what would happen is there's a significantly reduced risk of him experiencing life-threatening symptoms. So that is what the vaccine does. It's just like if I had the flu shot and I got the shot not to avoid getting the flu, but to make sure that I was okay in going through that course of the virus. Same thing with COVID. So the problem comes in particular, we're going to talk about Brazil today. You have the indigenous population that is being decimated because they're not getting access to healthcare. They don't have the same kind of immune response because they're largely isolated. So they're just being absolutely ravaged by this virus. So what do? I think the last total is less than half of the population has even received some vaccine. We can argue effectivity between different strains here, and I'm struggling a little bit because it's there are so many factors in it, and if you go out and you read Glenn Greenwald in particular, he helps really put together the dynamics because there's a little bit of racism there. There's also income inequality. All of these factors go into what's happening not only in Brazil but in other parts of Latin America, but Brazil particularly. And the reason why we're going to focus on that is because U.S. meddling is part and parcel to the death toll there. Let's not sugarcoat it. The imperialism of the U.S. has contributed to some of the death count here, and it's still outstanding, whether it's as low as 4,000 or up to 100,000 deaths because of what we were doing in South America. So think about that when you are railing against the migration of immigrants across our border. What we do matters, right? So Andy, this is the one point that I want to agree with AOC on. When she put out her new video, she did point to our policy in South America having a direct effect. And that is the only point that I will agree with her on in that particular video, but it's not fair to bring it up because we didn't show it. So,
Well, the other thing is that if we look at different governments in South America, the one that you can point to that is more neoliberal than any of the other ones, with a leader that is rather Trumpian-like, would be Brazil, right?
mhm.
And if there's anything else that we know about countries in South America, is that a lot of them are considered socialist and are always pushed back against the U.S., which is why they have targets on them from the U.S.
Right, right. And Mike, good point. Mike says, believe the science as long as it can be used against Republicans and not establishment Dems. And you're right. This is, again, performative use of talking points to support a particular notion. And this is where we get into a lot of trouble because you're right, Andy, a lot of these governments, and this is where, okay, so I am not endorsing or nor am I being paid, but Glenn's got a new book out that talks about as a journalist, what he went through to take the information that was used, or he had a whistleblower, and he was using that information against some serious, serious corruption, particularly in Brazil, and what he went through. So I read, if you go out to his Substack, he's got this excellent write-up to kind of lay the groundwork for what was going on politically there. And the Bolisario faction had ties and support to the Trump organization. But before you stop there, Greenwald also points out that it was the US who installed a dictator for, was it 2 decades prior to that? So you cannot just look at Trump and put a nice, neat package on it and say, okay, it was the Trump administration who did this. No, the US has been meddling in their affairs to the detriment of their own people for decades. So this kind of sets it up. And I do highly encourage you, if you're not going to read his book, at least read his Substack on it. It's a long write-up, but he does an eloquent job at setting up the politics behind it, which takes us into where we are today. So there's your background on that. I didn't include a link, but you know, Andy, you bring it up, so I think I should. But okay, so here we have the groundwork for the global map. And then what came out was the HHS annual report. And so for those who don't know, Health and Human Services, they issue quarterly and annual reports, and they were required to by law because it's our agency, we're the boss, we're supposed to review it. How many of you have actually read it? 0. So I encourage you to read this whole report. And you know, when I saw the other news organizations talking about that, like, oh, it's super dry. No, it's not dry at all. Because when you see what our federal dollars were being spent on and what priorities we were putting on this agency on our behalf, there's nothing dry about it. It's actually horrific. So I put a link there. I highly encourage you to go and read it, because when you go through the report, you see pages and pages of programs where we didn't talk about feeding the hungry or homelessness or health issues. We talked about abortion. That was it. Abortion. Over and over and over again. We worked with the Tories in the UK and had a global summit about abortion. We had all of these different, like in South America, for those who aren't aware, there are countries in South America where if you even attempt abortion, you can be jailed for life. And we were celebrating all of that. And that is in the HHS report. So to clarify, because we've talked about Medicare for All, HHS is a government organization that is tasked with, they just do surveys and summaries. They don't actually manage things like Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. They're just oversight, reporting. They don't do the day-to-day stuff. And so you'll see that in this report, what, you know, their programs and practices. But the page that came out on the news, the only page they really covered was page 49. So Andy, if you have that graphic up.
Yeah, it's already up.
Okay, perfect. So on page 49, this is where you had, you know, oh, the horror in the news reports, because they were talking about the prior administration putting a priority on influencing South America, in particularly Bolivia and other South American countries, Cuba, Venezuela, all of these countries, because, and they say it here, they wanted them to reject the Russian vaccine, which is called Sputnik, was Sputnik 5?
V.
Sputnik
V.
I didn't know if that was a Roman numeral or V, but Sputnik V, I guess V is for vaccine. They wanted to reject it, not because it wasn't effective, but because we didn't want them to feel good about Russia, right? We wanted to maintain control, influence, and the touchy feel good for the US. And that was all it is. And here is specifically for this page. It's just a screenshot. Again, the link is here. Please go and read it. We're very open about the bullshit that we were doing. And I think I am rightly justified in calling it bullshit, because nowhere in here did it talk about the cost of human life, right? Because the US, I even hesitate to call them US vaccines, because these are by global manufacturers who are not, they have no allegiance to the United States.
Right, and they're manufactured in Europe.
Right. Donor class is what this is. It's not a US company that we were in alliance with. It was donors from these companies, from their PACs, from their executives. And we were forwarding their interests over the effort to save people, right? So you had Russia came out in like August. Somebody check my timeline here, but it was like August where they were rolling them out and ready to go. In fact, February of last year, all the employees of the company in Russia that made this had their vaccine. They all got it. And then it started rolling out to Russian officials and their oligarchy, and then everyone else who wanted it in August. Ours didn't get released here in the US until, I don't know, when did Congress get theirs? December, I think it was.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So how many people died between one and the other? And is the US government, are we culpable for that?
They had to negotiate with the insurance companies.
Well, you bring up that point too, because I was a little surprised when I signed up for the vaccine. They asked for my insurance information. I'm like, why? Why do you need that? Oh, that's right, because you are going to, okay, yeah, there's money going to change hands to my insurance company. I thought it was going to be free. It's not free?
Well, it's not. It doesn't cost you anything, but it's just,
it's not free.
It's certainly not free.
Oh, weird. Weird how that works. So here is what we were doing in South America, and we had been doing it for quite some time. So all of this started very early on in the last administration in 2020, when we finally figured out, oh, hey, this is kind of a big deal. So what transpired was, yeah, we were setting up why do we have a CDC branch in Brazil? Well, because this is how you make money. And for those people who don't know, Brazil has, which I actually agree with this law. If you are going to sell a product in Brazil, and it doesn't matter what that product is, it could be a food product, it could be technology like, kiosks or any type of technology. Brazil has a law that you must manufacture in their country in order to sell it. This is why the US had to open a CDC office in Brazil, because there's money changing hands. Everybody got that? That's how that works. So I personally agree with Brazil's law. I wish we had one of those in the US. We don't, but that's why the Trump administration was trying to open a CDC office there with HHS oversight. So, yeah. So, all right, Andy, let's get into this. And you actually brought this to my attention days ago. It may have been Friday of last week, about the US pressuring Brazil to not go with Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. And I didn't know anything about this. How did you learn about it?
Oh, I got it from Hunter Biden's laptop.
Okay, that's good. That's
I
good.
told him I could fix his computer, no problem. And don't worry, I won't look at the hard drive.
You're right. Exactly. That's hilarious. Yeah, that whole Hunter Biden thing. That's
actually, I heard about this story, and I should give props to Jamal Thomas of Sputnik Radio and his show Fault Lines that was talking about the story that had just come out a couple of days ago, and so he gets the credit.
Okay, very good. Well, all right. Shout out to Jamal. But yeah, this was not on U.S. media at all, except for that reference to page 49 on the HHS. Anytime we can point at the prior administration and say, oh, orange man bad, but we don't talk about this portion of it. So, Andy, this is the next graphic. It's kind of a hard to read graphic, but so on this one, I went out and it reminded me of the Bernie Bro critique. The only thing I could find was uh, the Sputnik V Twitter. They're like, oh, it's Mean Girl Twitter. And those were the write-ups on the Sputnik V. So shout out to you, Sputnik V Twitter. I love your snark. And, you know, I was trying to go out and look at all of this critically to be objective. And I got to tell you, Sputnik V was right. And I hated that they were right because I wanted this to be Russian propaganda the way that we have in the US, and it's not. And the reason for this is I looked at the journal of the JMA, and then I looked at the BMJ from Yale. These are the publications and studies that have been used and misquoted to reject the efficacy of the Sputnik V vaccine. And those were the articles that I found aplenty in US media talking about how Sputnik V was rushed and should you trust it, and it's not effective against the South American variant, which is right now ravaging Brazil. All of these things. And when I went to look at the studies that they referenced, I was like, yeah, Sputnik V, you're right. This is all being manipulated. Why would we publish articles here in the US, particularly for some really big publications, doing this? And Andy, you know, you and I talked about it before we started. It all comes down to money, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
This makes the world go round.
okay, so here we have this global pandemic. People are dying, people are suffering. Some parts of the world get access to healthcare. We don't. But yet you have this rush to forward the donor class of each one of these brands rather than the vaccine itself to get the entire world vaccinated. It seems like biting your nose off to spite your face, right? So if people in Brazil are dying and this virus is allowed to thrive and mutate, isn't that coming back just to the US? Oh yeah, it is. This variant is already in Florida and other parts of the country. Florida and parts of New York have it. So while we have spent all of this time to downplay the efficacy of somebody else's vaccine, now we have a new strain coming that was a 2.2% more virulent. It's transferred easier, and more people are dying.
Right,
So,
right. It's a further variant from the B117 that was the first real major variant that we saw coming out of the UK. So it's mutated even farther than that now. And every time it does, we're seeing that there's there's less efficacy with the vaccines that are currently being produced, as well as, and a lot of people don't realize this, the amount of time that you remain vaccinated is becoming less. This is not a one and done. This is maybe not even a year worth of protection as we're looking at it right now. Most people don't know that, right? They're thinking that, oh, I got my shot in my arm, everything's good, back to work, back to baseball games. Let's fill, 95,000 people at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh or wherever, and it's all good. No, this is a lot more complicated than what you're thinking and what they're telling us.
Oh, absolutely agreed. I mean, there's a reason why I have to get a flu shot every year, right? It's a different strain of the flu, and we have to guess at which one's coming out. And our scientists do the best they can to address which one they think is going to cover the globe. COVID is going to be the same way forever. So just, you're right, Andy. And I was talking to somebody who was adamant about getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because it was one and done. And you're right. I'm like, no, Johnson and Johnson has already said probably by summer you're going to need a booster because of these mutated strains that are coming out. And I think this is going to be the new normal. So then, hey, go back to when we started talking about universal health care. How many times do I have to pay for this vaccine? So I'm not a risk to myself or others in my community.
Right, right. And I think places like Texas, where they've basically said, "Oh, we're done. Everything's good. No, nothing to see here. Everything's back open again." And I've been watching the last 2 days where the Blue Jays have had been in at the Rangers home stadium with their home opener and the first series there, and they filled the stadium. It's the largest gathering of people, um, in the United States since the pandemic began, right? So, what is the Arlington area going to look like in 2 weeks?
Good point. Good point. And that's where we're seeing significant spikes in Michigan. And honestly, this is the part that science, our virologists are having an issue with. The whole idea that it's just red states is no, blue states, in fact. So they are in the public sphere talking about, do you still have these shutdowns of businesses? Do you still, red states didn't shut down, but blue states did. Why are blue states having it? And it all goes back to our behavior and this whole idea that, oh, I've got vaccinated, I'm going to run out and, live my best life. Doesn't work that way. So Andy, you and I talked about Canada because, on my own personal, this is anecdotal, but my own personal Facebook group, we were talking, it was mostly Americans, about when the age requirements would drop. And I was like, yeah, we're still at 65 here, but it'll go to 18 next week. And then a friend of mine who lives in Ontario said, no, the age is still 80 here. And I was floored. What's going on in Canada where you guys are not getting the vaccines?
Well, the problem is, I think that first of all, let's talk about the wider issue about what's happening, and this can also be we can see that that Jamal Thomas on his thing was also talking about Canada, that they were putting out a notice that they were looking for celebrities to hire them to extol the virtues of how Canada has dealt with the virus and the rollout of the vaccine as a PR move, right? And why is that happening? And we see that in the US, the only thing that you can really point to in the US that they've been able to do better than horrible is the rollout of the vaccine. And why is that occurred? And a lot of, I think, it has to do is America with the ability to, I'm just going to say it, with the ability to bully other issues with the fact that the American dollar is the reserve currency in the world, right? And the strength of their economy and their ability to play bully and to say, no, look, you're selling to us, right? We want to vaccinate all our people first. And the reason for that is that was the only way to deal with the virus that makes people money, right? That makes sense in a capitalist society, right? That's a very huge thing, and we've talked about that before. And I think that's an important factor here, right? The U.S. is throwing its weight around in order to secure enough vaccines for their people, because that's the only way for oligarchs to continue to make money in the way that they need to make money, because the only other way to deal with this was to, continue to pay people to be at home, and that doesn't make them anything, right? So I think that that's the important thing to talk about right off the top. So why is that relevant to what's happening in Canada? Well, Canada, like I'm unvaccinated, it's really unclear when I'm going to be able to even start looking for a vaccine. And I think the reason is that the thing that Canadians did worse during this was the rollout of the vaccine, but clearly just because they don't have the international clout that the US does. So they can't get as much vaccine, right? I've heard the premier of Ontario, the head of the government in Ontario say that we're ready to distribute. We've got all our centers set up to start vaccinating people, but we can't get the vaccine, right? Well, you know, you can't get what's not available to you. And we're seeing that now there's the side effects are that Canadians are getting vaccinated at a quite a bit smaller, lower pace than their US counterparts. And that's pretty significant. And, you know, I hope I've explained why I think it's occurring adequately so you can see what's happening.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I get the capitalism argument and I'm totally in agreement with you, but as an American, where we have 330 million people, and the majority of our small businesses really struggled, our people struggled, we're still under risk of people being evicted because of all of this, in a country where our government thought it was not important to support us on a monthly basis like European and Canadian governments did. For some reason, they value their people more than we value ours. Do you think it is right and just that we get it first, or are you leaning more towards the economics of it?
Well, you know, whatever the reason, and it is happening, right? But I don't think anybody should be surprised at this because of, you know, the American propaganda machine has the full weight of the corporate media behind it, right? So the narrative is controllable. You could always say, like, I mean, the one glimmer of hope in the media that doesn't consider itself independent or left leaning, right, is a show that's been on the air for how many decades, right, on Sunday evenings, which is 60 Minutes. And they were reporting on the rollout in Florida, right, that there was a community in Palm Springs that is almost entirely, you know, well-to-do white people that were one of the first groups to get the virus. You know, the Rick DeSantis, you know, the devil's representative here on earth, decided that that he was going to allow seniors to be vaccinated before healthcare professionals. Well, why is that significant? You might say, well, the seniors are at risk. Well, that's an interesting way to get vaccines in the arms of people that have the most clout financially in your state.
Yeah, okay, good point. Good point. So even in the US, the rollout has been less than moral, less than sound.
Well, the other thing is that the state of Florida, instead of doing the proper thing of paying for sites to distribute the vaccines, they, you know, did the capitalist thing of negotiating a contract with Publix, the food grocer, right,
Yeah.
in Florida, in order to roll this out. Well, they obviously don't control this. And so if you want a vaccine, you have to integrate with Publix and you have to be close to a Publix. And so why is that significant? Well, the grocery stores have a tendency to be in the more significant counties and cities in Florida, and one of the poorest regions, very close to Palm Springs, where this place we were just talking about, The nearest Publix is 30 miles away. Most of the residents don't have cars. It's a 2.5 hour ride on 2 or 3 different buses to get there.
Mm.
Right.
So what you're saying is zip code matters.
Yeah. Zip code and color of the skin always seems to play a part.
Yeah. Oh, so the last graphic I think plays into this when we talk about propaganda in the wake of a global pandemic. So this is the graphic, Andy, from Sputnik.
It's up.
Okay, perfect. So in this one, this is where I really wanted to be objective, but in the back of my head, I wanted to prove that Sputnik V and their article that came out was propaganda, and I couldn't. As I read their article, I was like, okay, so obviously some of the wording here is not objective, but it's their product, so I get it. But what they were talking about was this published study that came out from the Moscow Times and a number of other US publications saying that the Sputnik V was not as effective. And they cited this particular study. This originally was a study from BMJ Yale that was published in MedRxiv, which you can see a screenshot here. I've included links to all of it. And in the article, Sputnik pointed out that, number one, this was not a peer-reviewed study. So that is important for people, particularly for those of us who are not clinicians or, you know, just kind of being thrust into this science and medical world because of this. So there are the difference between a BMJ Yale publication and something like the Lancet. The Lancet does have peer review, whereas this one, BMJ, actually cites it in their header that they're not peer reviewed. So the difference is I do a book report and I publish it and say, you know, Huck Finn is a terrible work and it's nobody should read it and whatever. And I just publish it. That is my opinion. I maybe have some cited sources, things like that. That's the BMJ article. The Lancet would take my published opinion of, you know, for in this example, Huck Finn, and refute it, point out where I'm wrong, point out where I'm right. And what it is from the scientific method and the scientific data review, you have peers and cohorts who look at your published information and either say, yes, you got it right, or your numbers are wrong here. So if you recall, let's go back to the anti-vaxxer argument. You had hundreds upon hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that said vaccinations are effective, they don't cause autism, all of that sort of thing. And then you had one guy publish a non-peer-reviewed study that said vaccinations cause autism. One. And what did the anti-vaxxers? They gravitated towards that one and said, see, look at here. And they ignored the hundreds of other studies. Here's the same thing that is actually happening. And the Sputnik folks are absolutely right in this. This non-peer-reviewed study was actually refuted in the Lancet, and the Lancet has come out and said, not only is it effective, but in their level 3 trials, this company went further than they needed to, and they showed their level 3 study data well before they were required to. They invited people in. It's totally effective. So here it is. I wanted to say that, and not because Sputnik is Russian, I wanted to say that a corporation was doing its own propaganda, but no, they're actually right in pushing back on what is US propaganda antithetical to the science in this particular case. So I want to make that very clear that being objective, I'm always going to look with a critical eye at propaganda from a corporation. But in this case, it's US media that seems to be siding with government policy for political gain over the lives of people. And that is a heinous place to be.
Yeah, and it seems to be the status quo.
Yeah, nothing will fundamentally change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is exactly where we're at, and it's unfortunate in this particular case that would be so. So Yeah. I'm now totally depressed. So
Oh, fuck off. You are not.
yeah. So so
Are you
this is
gonna
what we're,
do like a big Hollywood death scene where
yeah, just
fall down the
yeah.
stairs?
No, no, that's a normal day for me. So so
Normal day in the life of an American.
yeah, pretty much. So if you can get a vaccine, sign up and do it, and you may actually have to fight for it, depending on where you are. And I don't mean fight your neighbor. I mean follow up, find out when you can get a vaccine. You know, in my own case, it was a cute story. I signed up, and the online stuff is absolute crap because it was kludged together. And I signed up and it asked me, are you mobile? Can you get transportation? I'm like, no, I can't drive. And so they sent me to a drive-in clinic, right? So it was funny to me, but what that means is, well, I'm going to have to make some accommodation for myself, look out for myself, and either find a ride or find a new location. And that's what we ended up doing. So I would highly encourage you to I don't want to use the word accountable, but I believe that you are your best advocate in this case. And I believe that most local governments and, our nurses, hospitals, local officials, they're really trying to do their best. Cut them some slack and be your advocate for this. Find out where you can get it and when you can sign up and go and get it.
Yeah, but I think that, we always advocate for on this station for taking the high road, right? We're doing the thing, but like the other part of the story that I saw on Sunday in Florida was that there were, as soon as word got out of what DeSantis was doing, there were hundreds and hundreds of rich oligarchs that were flying into the state, not even from Florida, to line up to get the vaccine in these places in Palm Springs, right? And so, they're not waiting their turn. So,
oh, and we saw members of Congress, including those who said that the whole thing was a hoax, lining up first to get theirs, right? So, once again, it's just us.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's all I got, Andy. Any words of wisdom?
I'm just I just want people to use the brains, continue to think critically about your own place, what's going on around you. It's easy to get lost in the propaganda, lost in the shuffle, believing a certain number of things that you've come to an understanding about, but not others, right? We always have to keep an open mind that the world runs on money and the stories that you're hearing aren't necessarily true, right? Do your due diligence, do your research, look for clues, understand what's going on around you and what that implies for yourself and your family right now. Because quite honestly, with the numbers we've seen and the quote unquote acceptable losses that apparently governments on both the federal and state level have deemed are okay, you really end up just looking out for number one, right? Now, I would push back a little bit and say, in your community, make sure if you have information and you understand things, let your neighbors know too, right? There's lots of vaccine in the United States, but you are going to have to do at least a little bit of legwork at some point to make sure that you and your families are inoculated against COVID. And that's important, right? The government has already shown they're not looking out for you. You need to look out for yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, everybody. We'll see you back here on Friday, bright and early, 10 a.m. Eastern. Thank you so much.
Yeah, everyone, take care. Enjoy your Wednesday, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Speeding the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog. We keep it it.